Hello, friends. I'm so grateful to be back at UUCP. It's a little weird being in this sanctuary, but wow, Camille and Debbie are really filling it with such amazing music. It feels wonderful to be here. You know, when your minister, Reverend Christine Dance, and I were talking about what to do this year for the UUJAZ service, we agreed on the theme of those closest to the problems are closest to the solutions, centering the directly impacted organizers in our community. And so what better way to do that, to model that, than to turn the time normally that you'd be hearing me preach over to three of my comrades, colleagues, friends, to talk a little bit about what that means to them. So friends, would you introduce yourselves to our community, please?
Peace and blessings. I am Mika Maharaj, and I am here today as a Black woman who is queer, neurodivergent, and has an invisible disability. My family and I have been greatly impacted by police violence, houselessness, migrant injustice, and racial trauma. And I'm so thankful to be here today representing the Phoenix Local Organizing Committee for Justice or Else, for whom I am an admin as well as an organizer, and I am also the media coordinator for No More Deaths in Tucson.
Hello, my name is Sarah Tacova, and I am with Black Lives Matter Phoenix Metro. I'm one of the co-directors and co-ministers of activism, and I am a Black, queer, non-binary person who is the daughter of a climate refugee and from Ethiopia, and directly impacted in a variety of ways. I come to this work as a decolonial climate abolitionist, and I also engage in a lot of climate activism as well as I'm finishing my PhD in sustainability.
Hi, everybody. My name is Annlise Ortiz. I use she, her pronouns. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm a born and raised Arizonan, and I work at the intersection of criminal justice and reproductive justice. I started this work because I was raised in a very religious household in which we were constantly reminded growing up that abortion was one of the worst things that you could do. And it wasn't until I was about 18 and my very first real relationship, which was also an abusive relationship, when I realized that if I were to become pregnant, both myself and a potential child would be in serious danger. So I got out of that relationship, fortunately, and I have been organizing to help people obtain full bodily autonomy since then.
So my question for you next is around what it really means to follow the lead of directly impacted community. I know it's something that you say a lot at UUJAZ. It's part of our values statements that when we look for work to do in the community, we try to come with a lens of how can we support you. And I also know that in order for people to really understand what that means, it's helpful to have examples. And one thing I know about the three of you is you're wonderful storytellers. So would you have any examples that you can give to us on what it looks like when you're partnering with UUs or others and it feels to you like you're in the lead and you're feeling that support that people are intending to give you?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that so often we see the idea of wanting to follow the leadership and then of directly impacted people, but when you've been directly impacted by poverty, by trauma, by all of these other things, you might be going about something differently than someone who's not. And so when you follow the leadership of, it reminds me of, you have to make sure you do not repeat, for example, what MLK said in the letter from a Birmingham jail of the white moderate. Says, I agree with you in theory, but I don't agree with the way you're doing it. And that takes a lot of work, making sure you're not coming in to learn and listen and be humble. And I think UJAZ has done a great job of that in a lot of different ways. I think one of which I think the first time that we worked closest together was actually in Fighting Line 3. And it started actually with an invitation Janine had sent out to myself and other members from BLM. And first off, I just appreciated the invitation. As a racial justice org, a lot of the white mainstream environmental movements kind of erase our work, our intersectional environmental work, and fail to kind of see us as environmental leaders. And so I just appreciated the invitation, and then in bringing us out, even making that possible. And then we had such a good time, we decided to go back. And really, you guys had given us the opportunity to lead there in a way that we hadn't done in organizing an action trip across the country with a bunch of people. And there was a lot of learning lessons and things that we grew from that. But I think it was just like the opportunity to see us and to take our leadership was really great in building these relationships. And then another work that we've done is some of the solidarity work that we do in Black Mesa and the Navajo Nation. And so the work has really changed from initially it was like land defense work, and then COVID hit and there was massive food shortages in the Navajo Nation, and it became mutual aid work. And so just in the ways that you've been able to step up and resource the access to places and spaces such as using different churches as a drop site. In fact, we actually boxed our last trip in this here, and so that was great because that's one of the things that we challenges that we have with COVID and all the other complications is like, where do we have space to box resources for 45 families? And so that was really helpful, but also just like being able to leverage and use your networks to help us in the ways that we didn't have access to. We most recently have joined with previously, prior to the uprising, we were completely grassroots and unfunded and volunteer. And since entering the nonprofit world, we didn't know what we were doing, and we were like, where does the money come from? And so it was a great help. You were able to get a professional grant writer to help us send us a bunch of grants that we could look into, and we've still been using that resource. But even just like random things, one of the things that most of our members are low income and are pretty much always plagued with car issues, and so being able to leverage your resources and leverage your networks to be able to find us a car mechanic and be able to make even getting our cars back on the road accessible has been a huge help. But I think one of the greatest and most consistent things that we've seen in our partnership is just being flexible and responsive, especially with a lot of activism. Sometimes we do have to react to a situation like what happened this last fall with a viral incident in the Multicultural Center at ASU, and we were under attack and they were trying to kick me out. And being able to help us organize in a week a press conference and at the last minute be able to speak. I think we gave you the night before. We're like, can you get on the agenda? And so I think just being agile and being responsive and flexible has been really helpful, and grateful for that in our partnership.
Mask for a moment. I think that what I appreciate most about the way that UUJAZ centers leadership of directly impacted individuals is the standard of care that you give to those individuals. I share a space within the Defund Coalition work that we partner together on. I can remember stepping into leadership in that space just as I was let go from a multi-million-dollar company that I worked for 5 years. As an underwriter, helping other individuals be able to purchase homes while my own family was houseless. I can remember when I became disabled, no longer being able to produce up to their standards and no longer being a valuable resource for that company. I recall our CEO even sending out messages to our email addresses in the wake of the George Floyd incident and uprising, explaining that the reason that the company did not have more Black leadership is because it lacked Black talent. Coming from that experience, which was incredibly traumatizing on a daily basis, seeing my only value in what I could produce, seeing myself belittled, only cared for while I was on the clock, and then partnering with UUJAZ, having a completely different experience coming out of that. Our space had so much value, so much merit, so many amazing ideas. And when a grant opportunity came up, we were almost ineligible because we didn't have a fiscal sponsor. We weren't a 501c. We just had all of these brilliant ideas and all of this passion about divesting resources and funds from one of the most brutally dangerous police forces in America and putting those resources into our communities. And UUJAZ stepped up to be that fiscal sponsor that allowed us to build out our capacity and to have the funds that we needed in order to do this work that was so incredibly vital to our communities. While I was doing this work, I personally came up against many challenges, constantly moving, never in the same space for more than a week or two. And UUJAZ, the board, and Janine came together and found a creative way to support me and my family so that we could have a stable place, so that I had one less thing on my shoulders so that I could do this work that I felt I have such a calling on my life to do within my community. And I will never forget that. It was so incredibly appreciated. And because they put me and my family above just what I could do and the labor that I was capable of first, my family and I now have a stable home. And I greatly appreciate that and will never forget the fact that UUJAZ really walks what they talk. We see so often on their pages them speaking about providing socially just lives for the people who reside in Arizona. They talk about partnership, they talk about supporting the community, they talk about centering Black leadership, but it's not just something that they use to fill a page or to provide the Arizona Corporation Commission to prove they're a 501c3. This is really a way of life for the people of UUJAZ, and my family and I cannot be more thankful and appreciative.
You know, when I think about UUJAZ and the partnerships that we've been part of, what's really important to me is the way that y'all show up, and show up in a way that models for allies in the community, what it looks like to be in a space in real solidarity, taking a step back, passing the mic to directly impacted leadership, and demonstrating that for not only other individuals and other allies or potential allies in the community, but also to other organizations and other nonprofits that might, be in the space and need that guidance. And that leadership from you all. So I thank you for that, whether it's coming to testify at a city council meeting where I've seen y'all show up and be bold and not have, questions of the directly impacted leadership, but saying this is what's needed. You can count on me to be there. I think the other thing is the most important resource that I think when we think about organizing, it often comes down to money and the need for money. And I think I come from the nonprofit space, and so often you see grants and people that have the ability to give, questioning organizations, and you have the constant deliverables and the reporting, and that really holds back the work. And I think that you all have demonstrated, what it looks like to show up with resources and trusting the leadership of directly impacted people, and knowing that directly impacted folks truly know where those resources need to go, and that's what the calling is. And so I thank you for that too.
I really appreciate these stories and your generosity in coming to share them. I feel a little overwhelmed. We want to close out this conversation by letting folks know what they can do next, because there's always calls to action and always things that we need support in. So I'd love for you all to hear it directly from these partners. Where do we go next?
Thank you, Janine. So I sit on the board of Desert Star Institute for Family Planning, which is a health clinic that helps people access reproductive health care. And I also serve as part of a statewide coalition that is working to stop some really bad bills at the state legislature that aim to ban and restrict access to abortion and other reproductive health care services. We are in a position right now where by June of this year, the Supreme Court could very likely overturn Roe v. Wade. And if that happens, Arizona has a law already on the books that would make abortion a felony. And so it is incredibly important that we start organizing and preparing for that moment now. I would encourage you to get involved with reproductive justice organizations like Desert Star Institute for Family Planning and Planned Parenthood, because when the time comes that we're going to need people to organize, it's no longer going to be about we need to stop this bill or let's protest because we are upset about this bill. It has to immediately turn to direct action, because there will be pregnant people who need abortion services. And so what that could look like would be driving people to other states where they can get the health care they need. Maybe offering to provide meals for people who are in other states and might have to stay a few days for their appointments. Providing money, again, for the lodging that might be needed for people. And so I would encourage you to reach out to me. My email should be there in the chat. And then another thing I just want to quickly mention is there's another link that you could sign up to join, which is for Planned Parenthood's Clinic Escort Program, which is something that I'm part of as a volunteer. And what we do is we go to the clinics and we shield patients from protesters on the streets. We help them get inside safely so they can get their health care. We need trusted, trained leaders to be part of this program. And so there's a link there that you could sign up and join. And we would really appreciate that.
The Phoenix Local Organizing Committee for Justice or Else in the upcoming year is going to continue with our efforts to eradicate poverty, injustice, and inequity throughout Arizona and on a global basis for members of the Black and Brown communities. Also, our migrant justice work that I do along with No More Deaths in keeping migrants safe, making certain that there is no human being that is considered disposable, that every human being has a right to life, has a right to a quality of life and should be safe in crossing this desert. I think that the work that the Phoenix Local Organizing Committee is holding within the defund space that we would appreciate the most support with is providing greater access to our community to share their stories in a safe space regarding injustices and police violence that they have encountered. And probably the last thing that I would say is just supporting organizations like UUJAZ. You provide so much capacity for other groups that you partner with throughout the community, and I think that's probably the best way to meet the call to action.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways that you can get involved. I think one of them, right now, the most active campaign and what we really need help with is with the Tempe People's Budget. And so we are trying to get the city to realign its priorities. Right now, 1/3 of the budget, 100 million of the 300 million total of the budget goes to the police. We are trying to redefine public safety. We are trying to be able to really show that public safety doesn't just include police. So we're doing that in a variety of ways. We're doing some work with the unsheltered community. We are currently working on a pilot of alternatives, an alternative to police around domestic disputes situations. That's going to be a 3-month pilot that we're going to roll out this year. And then we need everyone to take the People's Budget Survey. And so the link will be in the chat. And so that's the simplest way. And no, you do not have to live in Tempe, because for 2 different reasons. Tempe is a sundown town. And so the majority of people can't afford to live in Tempe. The population doubles every day. And so we're taking the more environmental justice definition of environment. And so it's where you live, where you work, where you play. And so, you know, if you shop in Tempe, if you work in Tempe, you still have a valuable voice that needs to be heard. And so we are trying to, before the end of March, make sure that we get our report. That's when the directors are going to give their budget recommendations. And that's when we want to give our community recommendations of how we should reassign the money from the police back into the community. And so we definitely could use more volunteers. We need help getting more surveys. So if you can spread it in your congregation, in your community, at your job, that would be great. Some other work that we do is the Black Mesa Indigenous Resistance Camp. And so really that work has been about supporting the land defense of indigenous people who are being forcefully removed from their land. And right now, a lot of it also looks like mutual aid and bringing food boxes to elders. And so that work, we've been going up now quarterly. If you're interested in getting involved in that, you can reach out to us on our Instagram or our Facebook, DM, and say that you want to volunteer, and we can add you to the volunteer chat. And then finally, if you're interested in learning more about climate change, I will be part of a panel about climate change and the institutional imagination. It's critical in a state like Arizona, where we're already this year not sure where farmers are going to get their water with the budget cuts to the Colorado River, that we really start looking at and addressing climate change as an issue here in Arizona.
So much gratitude to Zara, Annlise, and Mika for coming today in this space and speaking about your incredible work. Thank you for everything that you do for all of our communities here in Arizona.